I never thought I'd end up here, spilling my soul like this. But life has a brutal way of flipping your world upside down. And I just need someone to listen. Truly listen. My name is Clara. I'm 36. And until recently, I believed my marriage was unshakable. I married Ethan when I was 31. He was warm, gentle, a bit shy, but in a charming way. We met at a mutual friend's lakeside barbecue, where he handed me the last s'more like it was a priceless treasure. I chuckled, he turned red, and somehow that evening blossomed into 6 years of marriage. We lived in a lovely 3-story home in a serene suburb lined with blooming magnolias and cobblestone walkways. The kind of place that made people murmur, "You're so fortunate." They didn't know it was mine. Legally, entirely mine. What no one noticed, what I ignored for far too long, was the shadow cast by his mother, Evelyn. Her name alone feels like venom on my lips. From the start, she despised me. I could sense it in how her gaze raked over me, critical, probing, searching for flaws. I recall our first meal together after Ethan brought me to meet her. "So, Clara, what's your family's business?" she asked. "My parents run a modest bakery in Vermont," I replied. "Oh," she said, her mouth curling as if she'd bitten into something bitter. "Not exactly old money, is it?" I let it slide. I loved Ethan. He stood up for me at first. That should have been my first red flag. When we married, I kept quiet about the house being in my name. I'd purchased it 2 years before meeting Ethan, using savings from my grandmother's estate and a hard-earned bonus from a decade-long career climb. I didn't want it to define us. I believed love wasn't about ownership or assets. But Evelyn? She assumed it was Ethan's house. She'd barge in without warning, her garish keyring jingling with spare keys she'd had made. "You should really brighten this foyer," she'd say. "It's too dim. Makes the place feel cramped. Lucky Ethan lets you choose the decor. Most men wouldn't surrender that much control. When you have kids, I'll ensure this house is child-safe." "Properly?" I'd force a smile, avoiding conflict. I thought it would blow over, but her grip tightened. She started visiting more, nitpicking my cooking, questioning my wardrobe, calling me too self-reliant, like it was a defect. One evening, I overheard her murmuring to Ethan in the dining room. "She undermines you, Ethan. A man should be the breadwinner. You're practically a tenant in your own home." I stood frozen behind the door, my pulse thundering. I waited for him to defend me. Silence. Then, his voice, quiet, hesitant. "I know, Mom. I know." Something shattered inside me. I didn't cry, not yet. But I felt a thread begin to unravel, the kind that starts small, but eventually leaves everything in tatters. After that night, I couldn't unhear it. "I know, Mom. I know." His words haunted me like a siren, and suddenly, everything tilted. It was subtle at first, like the ground shifting slightly beneath my feet. Ethan began staying out later, claiming extra work hours. But the faint scent of bourbon on his breath and a smudge of mascara on his shirt collar told a different story. I told myself it was just my imagination, fueled by Evelyn's poison. Then came the suggestions, cloaked in false concern. "Maybe you should work less," Ethan said one night over dinner, nudging his risotto aimlessly. "Work less?" I frowned. "Why?" "You seem overwhelmed. And, if we're thinking about kids someday." "You don't even want kids yet," I cut in, staring. "Well, Mom thinks—" There it was. I stood, my chair screeching against the tile. "Mom thinks? God, Ethan, do you even hear yourself?" His face flushed. He didn't respond. He never fought. He just withdrew. That night, I lay awake next to a man who felt more like a stranger than a husband, staring at the ceiling, listening to his uneven breaths, wondering when I'd lost him, or if he'd ever truly been mine. Weeks later, Evelyn crossed a boundary I couldn't overlook. I came home from work to find her in my bedroom, holding a bracelet my late aunt had given me, the one I wore at our wedding. "What are you doing?" I demanded. She didn't even blink, her eyes glinting with arrogance. "Ethan said you'd be late. I was tidying up. This place is such a mess." "This is my room, and you have no right to touch my things." "Our things," she corrected. "This house is my son's, and soon you won't be here to clutter it." A chill ran through me. "What do you mean?" "You'll find out," she said, setting the bracelet down as if it were worthless. "Sometimes a fresh start is best for everyone." That evening, Ethan came home with a folder in his hands and shame in his eyes. He didn't speak, just handed it to me. Divorce papers. I stared at them, then at him. Seriously? I whispered. After everything? After all I've given us? He wouldn't look at me. I just think it's for the best. For who? You? Or her? Clara, don't make this harder than it needs to be. Harder? I gave a sharp, hollow laugh. You moved into the home I built, let your mother taint it, and now you're tossing me out like I was never more than a guest. He didn't answer. I didn't yell or break anything. I just stood there, numb. But inside, a fire was kindling. Slow, steady, deliberate. Because I knew something Evelyn didn't. This house, the walls she strutted through, the floors she sneered down at, was mine. And she was about to learn what happens when you try to banish the owner from her own kingdom. The day I signed the papers, it poured. Not a gentle movie drizzle, but a cold, relentless deluge that seemed to erase everything. I stood in the courthouse lot, the folder in my bag, betrayal heavy in my chest. 6 years of marriage, reduced to ink on a page. I moved into a cozy rental for a week. Ethan didn't even have the courtesy to leave my house right away. He stayed. So did Evelyn. She wasted no time reshaping the place, erasing every trace of me like I was a stain to be scrubbed out. She tore down my vibrant artwork, swapped it for bland taupe prints. My sage-green drapes, replaced with stark gray shades that belonged in an office. I knew this because my neighbor, kind Mrs. Larson, called me, her voice trembling. I hate to meddle, dear, but that woman's ordering movers around like she owns the place. I thought you should know. Oh, I knew. And I was done staying silent. I waited 4 days, just long enough for Evelyn to feel like she'd won. Then I called my attorney. Is it all set? I asked. Signed and confirmed, she replied. It's yours, no question. Want me to send the notice? No, I said, pausing. I'll deliver it myself. That Sunday, I wore all navy. Not planned, it just felt fitting, like mourning a loss. I drove back to the house I hadn't seen in nearly 3 weeks, my heart racing as I pulled onto the familiar maple lane. I parked in my driveway. The den's light glowed. Through the window, I saw Evelyn sprawled on my sofa, a glass of Merlot in hand, smirking like she'd conquered the world. I rang the doorbell. Ethan answered, his face paling when he saw me. Clara, why are you here? I'm home, I said calmly. You can't just show up. You signed the papers. You don't live here anymore. I took a breath. I'd practiced this, but nothing could match the thrill of saying it aloud. Actually, I said, pulling a document from my bag, you're wrong. He took the paper, his eyes widening as he read. This says, the house is yours. It's always been mine. I bought it before we met. You never thought to ask, did you? Evelyn appeared behind him, wineglass in hand, her face pinched. What's this about? Hello, Evelyn, I said, my voice syrupy. You're trespassing. She snorted. Excuse me? This house is mine, legally, completely, solely. And as of now, I want you both out. She laughed, a brittle sound. You're bluffing. I handed her a copy of the deed, my name bold at the top. She stared, then turned to Ethan. You said this was your house. Ethan looked ill. I thought it was. I never asked. She never mentioned. Exactly, I said, stepping inside, brushing past them. I never said anything because I didn't think I'd have to. But you made your choice, Ethan. You let her ruin our marriage, and now she can't escape the consequences. Evelyn's mouth opened and shut, like a fish out of water. You can't kick us out, she shrieked. Legally, I can, and I will. Unless you'd rather the police handle it? She dropped her glass. It shattered on the floor, and in the quiet that followed, I smiled. For the first time in months. They didn't leave that night. Ethan pleaded, first logically, then with guilt, then with barely concealed frustration. Just give us a few days, he said, pacing near the banister like a caged animal. We need time to find somewhere else. You had time, I said icily. You had years while you let her destroy our marriage. You chose her. Now choose a motel. Evelyn was quieter now, fuming but shaken. Her hand shook as she gathered the broken glass, as if cleaning could reclaim her authority. They left the next morning. It was almost poetic. Evelyn dragging her luxury suitcase down the driveway, her stilettos clacking in defeat. Ethan trailing like a faded version of the man I once loved. But the story didn't end there. That week, I learned how deep Evelyn's malice had gone. She'd been feeding Ethan lies about me for years, claiming I was unfaithful, that I didn't honor him as a husband, that I was too driven, too free-spirited. She even suggested I was stashing money from him. Ironic, since I'd hidden nothing, until now. Walking through my house alone, I decided not to sell it or forget it. I wanted to reclaim it. So I did. I redid the master suite, repainted the walls, donated anything tied to them. I even burned Evelyn's shades in the backyard one evening, wine in hand, music blaring. Dramatic? Maybe. But healing. Then came a letter from Ethan. Not quite an apology, just a muddled attempt to reach out. "I miss what we were," he wrote. "Maybe we rushed things. Can we talk?" Rushed? I folded the letter halfway through and fed it to the shredder. He thought he'd married a woman who needed him. I'd chosen him. And when he forced me to choose between his mother and my dignity, he lost. Weeks later, I threw my first party in the revitalized house. Close friends, laughter, wine glasses clinking against newly painted walls. The place felt alive again, free of betrayal's chill. Then came the twist. My friend Lila, who worked at Ethan's new company, he'd switched jobs without telling me, mentioned him casually. "Guess who's in the cubicle next to me?" she said, sipping her drink. I raised an eyebrow. "No way." "Ethan. Looks like a shell of himself. Word is he's staying at his mom's tiny apartment. Apparently, she sold her place to cover some legal debts." I froze. Debts? Something about tax fraud from her ex-husband's company. Old mess, but ugly. Karma, indeed. Ethan, once so sure he owned everything, including me, was now trapped in his mother's cramped world. And Evelyn? Her social circle now whispered about her eviction from a house she'd boasted about decorating. Then came another letter, this time from Evelyn, handwritten, unsteady, like the words were carved out of her. "Clara, I've made countless errors. I thought I was protecting my son. I see now I drove him from joy. I don't expect forgiveness, but I hope you find peace." No return address. I slipped it into a rarely opened drawer. Not because it mattered, but because it didn't. I'd found peace, not from forgiving, but from freedom. I launched a small interior design business in the spare room, a dream I'd long shelved. I turned the guest room into a haven. Greenery, light, soft rugs. Sometimes I sit there with coffee, reflecting on how close I came to losing everything to people who never earned it. They thought they'd broken me. They didn't know I'd rebuilt myself long before they left. I didn't just survive them. I outlasted them. In a past they no longer get to rewrite.